Our next speaker has got almost as many years in the fire service as Terry had in the Met, but not quite. He's racing to catch him up. 23 years. Today he's in his 4th year as acting Chief Fire Officer. His specialist field is vehicle extraction, having been a UK World Rescue Organisation assessor for 15 years. He's also got a master's degree in business management, a graduate at the Institute of Fire Engineers, a fellow to the Chartered Management Institute, and a fellow to the Instruction of Leadership and Management. And for the past 8 years, Nfcc Transport Road Lead. I'm pleased to introduce Dan Quinn.
Probably try not to use the microphone and project my voice. Can everyone hear me at the back? Excellent. Okay. You've probably seen there's a little bit of jiggery pokery with the IT, and I'm using my own laptop for this. So if anything goes wrong, we might have to take a further comfort break, but we'll sort it out quickly, I'm sure. With thanks to Richard and to Derek and to everybody else as part of Prof, it's a great honour to be invited to present on behalf of the National Fire Chiefs Council to this conference. Really appreciate the invite, and as I've put within the main slide, part of it is around how the Nfcc and Prof are going to develop our partnership. We're quite new to the party, however I think our momentum we've picked up quite quickly and we're moving at pace, and I want to make sure that that momentum is continued. So some of the content of the presentation I'm going to go through will basically give you a bit of an oversight of what the Nfcc is, who are we, what do we do, how do we operate, and then a little bit in terms of the fire and rescue sector in terms of how it operates in a working environment, a practical environment, but also then some challenges for us about where maybe some of our opportunities to do more together, and particularly what I'm hoping to come across through this presentation is about bridging the gap between response and recovery. I think there's a genuine opportunity to actually go into the response side of the business rather than limited to the recovery side. So my next slide was about a little bit of an introduction, but that's been covered. Thanks very much, Derek. I was really worried that there was going to be some other things from the social media that you would have picked out and used against me. I haven't got any other trade skills. Apart from before I joined the Fire and Rescue Service, I used to be a butcher. So I worked in a family business in Pimlico, which was just off the Pimlico market. I did that for a couple of years before I chose my career of choice. So yeah, a little bit of insight there. Some people probably don't know that in my own career, so it's recorded, isn't it? So the purpose of the presentation, as mentioned, is just to describe the role, the function and products produced by the Nfcc, but also to talk about the way in which emergency services operate together. And I'm particularly picking up about the views around the 4th emergency service. So when I'm talking about how we operate together, I'm genuinely talking about how we can operate in a working environment in practice together. Okay, so have that frame in mind when we get to those slides. Particularly around the detail of principles of health and safety management, which I think would be useful in terms of how we operate as a fire and rescue service. And you might have heard it referred to previously as a safe person concept. So I'm going to try and talk through what that means for us and possibly how then you operate in exactly the same way in a hazardous environment. Again, I'm not trying to teach anyone to suck eggs because I know you do this on a day-to-day basis, but I think it will be helpful to see how we work together better moving forward. And then I'm going to highlight the process of learning that we have with partners and within the fire and rescue sector, and then pose that final question about what does this mean for you? Okay, so what is the National Fire Chiefs Council? Well, it's the professional voice of the fire and rescue service. So it is that single point of contact that represents all 44 fire and rescue services in the UK. And it does operate primarily within England, but it works very, very closely with devolved administrations. It's a registered company limited by guarantee and also a charity, but it's been around for a long time, 1941. Used to be referred to as the Chief Fire Officers Association. Some might be familiar with that old terminology. It is about driving improvement and development within the UK Fire and Rescue Service. Now, the role is advisory. However, having said that, the contents and the products that are developed by the Nfcc there is a very strong expectation that fire and rescue services are adopting them. And it goes so far as Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Service now will look to those products and check and see how a fire and rescue service are adopting them. So technically it's an advisory role, but there's a very strong responsibility upon fire and rescue services to do what the Nfcc are suggesting they should do. And then the chair, who's Mark Harningham, is, and he's the one who signed our partnership agreement. He is a single point of contact for Home Office, other fire professionals, the local government association, the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners, and other partners. So he is heavily well connected with regards to local and central government. So what's our strategy? Achieving more together. It's very straightforward. It is a genuine commitment, and a lot of it is around partnership, collaboration, activity. And we know that we can do things a lot better together, and it's not teaching anyone suckers, because we all know this, but from a fire and rescue perspective, it has taken a while for an Nfcc body to be operated in this way. So it's a really good time for us to be joining up and working together for the future. So what does this mean for Prof? One professional voice. It also means standards. So I've already covered off about the advisory. We've got a fire standards board, which is giving sort of strategic organisational level standards that our inspectorate will also hold us accountable to. And at a very practical level, and I won't steal any thunder from a colleague in the United Kingdom Rescue Organisation, but the practical extrication standards for vehicles, how you manage on the scene, is something else that also is being developed into practitioner standards that is within guidance itself. So you'll get that opportunity to have that conversation once. It also gives clear direction and consistency. So how is it structured? I've circled the area where probably we fit together, and I report into the operations committee through the technical response group. And you can see there's a variety of different areas of the business that is covered through Nfcc, but operations is where most of the activity takes place. The strategic commitments that we have, I've highlighted two in red, that I think between us we can make sure that we leverage, so that from an Nfcc perspective, why are we doing this work together? Why are we generating this partnership and undertaking activities? It very nicely aligns to, in my view, reducing community risk and vulnerability, and very much about efficient and sustainable partnerships, efficient financially sustainable. So, what does the Nfcc produce? I've already mentioned National Operational Guidance. Now, this is broken down into all incidents, so the little icon there you can see with the fire engine, that's all incidents operations. And there's links in the presentation to see this, so please do go and have a look. You've then got the context. So it breaks it down into operations, into the context, and there's a separate context for transport. Okay? And then within that, there's an activity which is called search, rescue and casualty care. It also sometimes bridges across to performing rescues, or even just under the banner of Transportation Road. All the links are provided. That is the guidance that every fire and rescue service will be operating to. They will be embedding it within their ways of working, and it does go down to both a strategic and a tactical level. So it does include some real practical things that they're required to do. Some of the products as well, if I can use my laser pointer, you've got position strategies with regards to smart motorways, and you've got emergency responders guides to alternative fuel vehicles. That's been deliberately designed so that we are all on the same page. So by all means, have a look at that. And then you're probably familiar with this document, which is the Strategic Road Responders Agreement, which I think is with our partners predominantly in the national highways. We are part of that. You look like you're going to say something, Richard.
Well, what I was going to say is I went through that document some years ago, which was part of the thing that prompted me about Prof. It's a 64-page document that talks about all the things that you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a page that mentions the rescue and recovery industry. And so it says clear, but none of you have got the vehicles to clear.
Yeah.
We haven't. All I was just saying is that somewhere along the line, through this partnership, it would be nice to be part of that document
Yeah.
going forward, because obviously we are part, and an intrinsic part of all of those things that you talk about.
Yeah.
Don't mind me saying.
No, absolutely. And I know we've got colleagues from National Highways here, so I'm sure they'll pick up on that.
Oh, I'm told.
Okay, fair enough. We'll move on quite quickly then. But in terms of, bear that point in mind though, because there are obviously within provisions of fire rescue service response capabilities, in my view, there are going to be gaps. And actually, I think there's an opportunity for Prof to be able to fill that gap.
Yes.
Right, so I'll cover it a little bit
Right,
later as well. So the wider sector context, what's going on within the wider sector, and it's already been picked up with regards to central government, so I won't go over that. But within within the fire rescue sector, there's a white paper out currently right now. The consultation ends on the 26th of July, and it will be probably the most significant reform of the fire rescue service since around about the time of the modernisation agenda around 2003. So it is a big deal. There's a lot in it. It focuses on people, professionalism and governance. But a couple of things I sort of picked out that I thought might be of relevance within it. And by all means, you can go and have a read of it. It's still out there. And you can even offer a consultation feedback on it, which absolutely welcome the opportunity for you to do that. Broadening the role of the fire rescue service is referenced in it. So actually adding greater social value, not limiting to legislation, the Fire Rescue Services Act, for example. And the drive for greater collaboration with partners, but also the establishment of a College of Fire, similar to possibly the College of Policing, colleagues, but obviously focused around certain key things initially, because it will be in its early infancy, but they will include things like research, having a central research, national research repository, actually does that for us. So I thought those things might be of relevance to you and might encourage you to have a read of it yourself. Right? It's still available now. So then a bit more of the practical stuff. So Joint Emergency Services Interoperability Principles or Programme. Again, not teaching anybody to suck eggs. I know you'll be familiar with this. But the GESIT was established in 2014. And then I put alongside it the duty to collaborate, which was initiated by the Policing and Crime Act in 2017. Now, Fire and Rescue Service is taking that very seriously. GESIP, I only heard this week, is actually getting a new body set up to make sure that GESIP across all partners is being reviewed, revisited, and ensuring that we're embedded within our operations, which is great. Absolutely welcome that. In practice, when we get on the ground, these are the sort of principles, these are the bits that you just need to know. And we do them a lot naturally. They're not something necessarily you're having to deliberately think about, but there are some bits in terms of understanding the risk jointly and sharing that situational awareness, which is trying to encourage that deliberate conversation on the scene and to understand what we know and what we don't know, where our gaps are, and how we can get a collective understanding of what we're going to do. Co-locating is a key part of that, and that's deliberately there just to get everybody deliberately together and have those conversations. If they're not naturally occurring, it drives it. And then you may well be familiar with this. This is terminology that we will use, so it's useful that you know it. We do things such as the joint decision-making model, which is a little sort of spinny dial that's there. That's the process that we will go through in order to make our decisions. And then this, known as methane, is the messaging that we will use, and it's deliberate so that we will send a consistent message back to partners, including you, about what's involved in the incident. So if you're familiar with that type of acronym and what it means, you can expect then obviously to see those type of items come through, particularly around things like hazards. So what does that mean in practice? This is what the Fire Rescue Service does to make sure that it is delivering its requirements of health and safety and putting in place relevant control measures. Now, you'll be familiar with most of these, but the concept of the safe person is that we know we cannot create an environment that is without hazard. So what we are going to do is try and make the person that goes into that environment as safe as possible. And that's the principle of it. And you, I'm sure, will adopt the same thing. Now, you don't have any control of the environments that you're going to be contributing to, delivering, but you need to make sure that your staff are well equipped and well positioned to be able to operate safely. So we use things such as the hierarchy of control measures, which is not ours, it's from the Health and Safety Executive, and it's very much an order that we would try and use to eliminate any risk if we can as a preference, and the very last stage is about discipline and PPE. We use things such as risk assessment, you can see there, so similar to the joint decision-making model, but how we understand and assess risk and what decisions we make off the back of it. Then we use cordons. I actually stole this from Partners in the Police, one of your very good documents, so you notice it's in blue, you can tell it's from police. And then this is one of ours, which is sectorisation. So these are all things that might be useful when you're rocking up at a scene, when you're communicating with fire and rescue staff, to understand about the different types of cordon control, but particularly sectorisation, which we use a lot within the fire rescue service. So we will separate up an incident scene to manage spans of control. So you will have commanders identified for each one of these sectors. They will have their teams that they will operate with, and it's all deliberately to control the amount of people that they communicate with. And it's normally on a business as usual basis, where it's not rapidly moving or slow, about 5. So that's the reason why we use sectorisation, but you will hear that terminology. Again, there's links in the document to be able to read what that means. And then lastly, we do instruction, training and techniques. So there we're demonstrating the dashboard lift. So you can see probably a little hydraulic rescue equipment just there. And then the very last bit is that personal protective equipment. Now I know we've already started to have conversations around standards, for example, and what that would look like for your organisations, you know, what equipment you would need to have available to you for personal protective. And that's something I think actually we can assist with, because obviously we've been quite used to operating in those environments. Right. So then, once you've been to an incident, of course you get learning from it. And we've got a number of mechanisms that we can use to make sure that we capture that learning and do better next time. Every fire rescue service in the country will have its own equivalent of an operational assurance team. So these are the teams that do post-event reviews. They will check and see what's happened, pick out any learning and change policy accordingly. On a national scale, you have national operational learning, which is actually done through the Nfcc. And what that will do is that will take some of the local learning that has a national impact and then share it and adopt it into national operational guidance. So you can see how the flow, the cycle is sort of being developed. And then you've got the equivalent of the joint organisational learning that is done through JESIP. And so that ties it into the partnership approach as well. In terms of how we operate, and this is where the clincher is, and I mentioned it briefly earlier, fire and rescue service will operate with phases of a rescue, which is this visual here. So again, it's something you might hear being referred to on the incident scene about the stages that they go through in order to effectively achieve a successful extrication. Right? They don't operate sequentially, they will be operating simultaneously, so they have multiple teams working in order to deliver this. But this is again something that will hopefully break down some of those potential barriers on the scene if the terminology is understood, like a joint lexicon or something. And then this bit here is where I think the most movement is. This is the emergency management cycle. Now, by virtue of the term recovery, you could look at that and think that actually it sits in isolation within this area of the cycle. I don't think that's quite right. And actually, I think you sit actually within part of the response area as well. Now, the reason I say that, I'll take my own fire and rescue service in Surrey as an example. Surrey has a large amount of strategic road network, quite a significant amount, big stretches of M25. We have a large volume of road traffic collisions that we go to. The gap in my capabilities is heavy. Okay? You can do that. For me to be able to have that capability is quite a significant training requirement. It's not necessarily something I'm going to do all the time. Now, I will have certain capabilities. I've got things like high abs and elevated platforms and all that sort of stuff. But I don't have anything that can lift and shift something that is heavy. That's where I think this partnership agreement is a first stage of us looking to see how that would be able to be exploited moving forward. I kind of hit my ending a bit early, so when you get to that point, still sound impressed. So progress today. It is with absolute great pleasure that we've been able to sign the Memorandum of Understanding and Partnership Agreement. It's actually been signed by the chair of the Nfcc, which is fantastic. I'm sure you can appreciate the chair of the Nfcc is all over the place, lots of competing priorities, absolutely saw the benefit of that, and his signature is on it. So when I do the partnership agreement, I'll be faking it a little bit, but you know it's already been signed. We've had continued dialogue with Prof and also with the Institute of Vehicle Recovery, and that again I think is start a beautiful relationship. I think we can do a lot more together. And we've also got established contacts with the United Kingdom Rescue Organisation, National Highways, National Police Chiefs Council, and with the Association of Ambulance Chief Executives. So helpfully, the lead for ACE that relates to road traffic collisions, vehicle recovery, etc., that's their sort of area of business, is actually based in the southeast. So they're literally a neighbour of ours. So that's very helpful in terms of co-locating, and I think we can use that to our advantage. So as I mentioned, what does this mean for PROF? Working together to develop operating standards, I think we can help with that. We can definitely use our experience of what it means to operate in those environments. Again, knowing that you already do that, but I think we could potentially harness that with you. Continue to establish the contacts between PROF and local fire and rescue services. So one of the things that the Nfcc does is obviously a network. So if there's any issues, any concerns, then there's a dialogue that could be set up between local fire and rescue services. And I can offer that. Establish opportunities to work more closely within the response phase. So that's what I mentioned earlier about that dovetailing of phases. And then making best use of skills and capabilities that PROF organisations have and can bring to an incident scene. And that's my personal example of fire and rescue service. And then lastly, I think that we have an opportunity to integrate PROF into incident learning, into training, and into exercising. And I know it will be picked up later, but Ian from the United Kingdom Rescue Organisation, there's a national rescue challenge that takes place on an annual basis, and that is a fantastic showcase. It's the biggest one in the world. It's a brilliant showcase to make sure that your industry is best placed to represent what you're about and what you do, and you can get involved in that. That's my presentation. Thank you very much. Oh yeah, sorry, any questions? Just flabbergasted. Excellent, that was what I was aiming for.